Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Nerdy Affair, where we take our Wizard of the Coast and pair them up with our saucy, our spooky media setting. I'm Cody.
And I'm Spooky Joe, like a werewolf or
Ooh.
something.
Ow!
Oh. So hey, it's the spook times.
Yeah, it's that good old month of Reese
Reese
pumpkins.
pumpkins and
Dude, if I have a weakness, like if I was a superhero with a weakness,
yeah,
that's my weakness right there is Reese pumpkins. If
fair
you
enough.
hand me one, I can't resist. It's my kryptonite.
I mean, hey, that's a pretty good kryptonite to have, I think.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely the tastiest of the situations.
But yeah. Yeah, I mean, I understand that. I like those pumpkin delights from Little Debbie's. But in any
Ooh.
case, hey Cody, how have you been?
I have been well. It's October. Who would have thought? I
Yeah,
time is nebulous and weird, and it's nice to get into that setting where the heat is not like destroying my body anymore.
yeah. As a person who records in an attic, I feel that. Uh,
Yeah, oh yeah, I get it. We've got three computers in this room, and the air ventilation is like stuck behind like a door. Um, that doesn't isn't necessarily like airflow positive. So I feel that too. I get it.
yeah. But hey, shall I introduce this week's saucy, spooky pop culture affair?
Yeah, it looks like Wizards of the Coast is back again. He's pouting a little, but I think we got a good one in store this
Yeah.
week.
All right. So this week's uh, pop culture property enjoys spookily walking behind you. Uh,
Nice.
Weird kind of like synthy 70s 80s soundtrack that gets more intense as you go along and just doesn't know when to quit. It's Halloween.
Man, I just thought you were describing me in high school.
Oh boy. Ugh. Ugh. Yeah, pull on my
Oh,
collar a little bit. Yeah, a lot of people see or sort of say that Halloween is kind of the like prototype slasher flick.
yeah.
I know that there are people out there who kind of like debate that fact for various reasons, but in any case, it set up a lot of hallmarks for the genre. Things like an almost impossible killer, an everyday person trying to stay alive, that growing tension of being pursued and caught. And I think I've said it before on here, but and on other shows we've done is horror isn't necessarily the genre for me, but like I am one of those people who kind of like reads plot synopses and things like that, and I'm aware enough of it just by like existing in the world and like having friends who are into it as a genre to have an understanding of it. So um I think that there's something intriguing about trying to take Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition and manipulating it into, like let's be real, like what would probably be like a one-shot tabletop role-playing game. Um
Oh yeah, absolutely.
to This is something that we'll be discussing in our little chat here. Do you have any overall thoughts about Halloween as sort of like a pop culture touchstone?
I mean, there's like the big three, right? In my eyes, when I think of a slasher flick, like a classic slasher flick, the first three things that come to mind are Michael Myers, Halloween, Jason, Friday the 13th, and Freddy Krueger, Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah.
Those are like the three classics, and they all kind of, with the exception of Nightmare on Elm Street, um, Michael Myers and Jason share a lot of like commonality and a lot of things that you can like pick apart and make a really interesting one shot for your players that I'm really excited to like tackle. I mean, I'm also kind of like a big old baby when it comes to like spooky, scary horror stuff. With some exceptions, I'll play horror games, although I'm not great at them. And I've watched horror movies in the past, but it's not like I'm not that thrill seeker that wants to see the next like, whatever the next like big horror movie that's supposed to like really scare people is.
Yeah. So, do you want to get the ball rolling with some
Yeah,
ideas?
let's yeah, so we're here because we're gonna craft ourselves a one shot or potential campaign, although I'd argue probably very hard to do. But let's talk about the big elephant murderer in the room, right? We've got it's Halloween. This is a slasher flick. We're gonna talk about Michael Myers right out the gate,
Yeah.
and like I said a little earlier, it's an unstoppable killing machine, and they're pretty scary opponents. And that those like the things that they do in these movies should be reflected in your game. Um, you're going to be building this monster a little differently than you would in a standard 5e game, right? First and foremost, it will just be one slasher, right? It's very rare to see multiple slashers in a slasher flick unless you're talking about like Scream or one of the like kind of slasher flicks that kind of goes against the grain or kind of flips the script and all that. But you're just doing one person. You're
Mhm.
Michael Myers. So we need to give them some firepower because in 5e fighting one person tends to be very one-sided against the one single person. So in my proposed idea, Michael Myers is going to not act once, but several times during a quote unquote round of combat, if there is combat. And they should deal a fairly decent amount of damage, right?
Yeah.
Michael Myers, especially when I was looking up, because I wanted to look up his kill count, right? Because I was curious, and man, it's pretty nuts what he does. So he should be pretty strong, and you could do this in several different ways. But I think to avoid a super quick TPK, um, obviously he's acting multiple times during initiative. Maybe you're rolling twice, maybe you're rolling three times for him, and he'll act in those sequences during the game. But during these turns, you can get creative with what he does. Instead of doing the most, quote unquote optimal play, maybe he, maybe don't necessarily play him super smart, right? Maybe he tries to grab an opponent to choke him out, and that doesn't work. And then maybe he switches it up and tries to stab somebody. Because at the end of the day, he's an unstoppable killing machine. Like he can do whatever the fuck he wants, right? Like if he
Mhm.
wants to go choke someone to death with a telephone cord and then take a knife to like stab somebody wildly in the back, like he can go ahead and do that. Secondly, killing him should never be the option, right? This isn't to say that you can't give him HP and that there isn't going to be combat encounters, because D&D 5e is built around the encounter system. What I'm getting at is that when the party does eventually get him to zero during a fight, that's only going to stun him for a small bit of time so that you guys can get out. Because ultimately, you're trying to escape or you're trying to call the police so that the police can get there and help deal with this. It's doing something so wildly like damaging to him that he flees, right? Because like that's how the first movie, spoilers for Halloween, that's how the first movie ends. He gets pushed off of a fucking building and he's like, "Nah, guys, I gotta go." So when the party cleverly does bring him to zero or happens to get good rolls, it's not the end for him, right? The players can't kill him, at least right away. Now, if you want to make a game where he does die, just know that like if you're going to add encounters like that, give him till his like quote unquote finale before you can actually take him down to zero and like, you know, kill him for good. Um Third, remind the players they don't necessarily have to fight, right? In most cases, they should be trying to flee or hide or avoid him at all costs. The fear is being caught alone with him. While the party will try to stay together because that's very embedded in 5th edition like mindset. Try to make it clear that hiding together is super dangerous due to its difficulty, right? Like if you're like, "Oh, let's all hide in a bedroom." If there's like 4 or 5 of you, there are not going to be that many hiding spots that Michael Myers isn't going to be like, "Oh, you're behind the bed, stab, stab, stab," right?
Stab.
Like um so the idea is that the party is going to try to, run away, or, if they do get caught one on one, they're trying to be slippery enough to get away from him. So that's kind of the goal here. While combat will always be an option, like there's always like that badass moment where the main character, or like the main characters in this case, like they find the shotgun in the basement or whatever, and they're like, all right, let's fucking go. Like, yeah, then obviously there's going to be some combat, but like the idea is going to be that he's going to be skulking around, being in places that the players don't want to be in, or don't want him to be in, and trying to avoid him if necessary. And then also an extra little spicy note. If you really want to amp up Michael Myers, just like from an aesthetic perspective, use music to help you. Start with an eerie tune that eventually starts to ramp up and like if you have like a soundboard or a way to like switch from like the ramping up music to like a sting, and then be like, and then Michael's here, like that's going to elevate Michael Myers in your game for sure. Um that being said, depending on what level you want the party to be, there are tables in the Dungeon Master's Guide on how to create, like, this is what a deadly attack looks like. So just like look that stuff up and know that, like, you are kind of setting the stage to, like, yeah, some people are going to die. That's kind of the inevitable thing of being in a horror film, is like you could be one of the unfortunate ones who gets stabbed in the face through the ironing board that you were hiding behind because he heard you, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
um but at the end of the day, you're also trying to, you're giving everybody the chance to experience this. So like, obviously don't go trying to gun them down at every moment, but like give him, I would say, go easy on his stats, because he will be invincible until you decide otherwise. But, you know have him not always be able to catch the individuals, or be able to necessarily see when they're in, like, skulking about in like the kitchen or whatever. Like sometimes he'll walk in, look around, and then leave. Like that's terrifying on its own, right? Like almost getting caught, and like having the players be taught, like, okay, you're hiding behind the cabinets, the middle island in the kitchen. You're holding your breath. You hear his footsteps clomp, clomp, clomp. There's a silence, and then he leaves. Like that, like you start to build tension that way. Like that's the kind of stuff you're going to be doing a lot with him. So
Yeah.
taking these like mechanical things and really really oozing it up in there is going to be a good slasher killing machine.
Yeah, that actually sounds really cool. Uh,
So hit me up with your mechanic. I'm excited about this.
yeah, so it was something that you had kind of addressed a little bit, which is I you know, I recommend, or rather a recommendation that I have is creating new backgrounds for a low level party. So the thrill of the slasher genre is kind of watching a group of normal people dealing with crazy forces beyond your control. And so because of this, you're going to want to have your party be a lower level, and probably mainly of the martial classes. I think that something like slinging spells while Jason or Michael Myers is probably going to be very difficult. It is a world that is set in a certain amount of realism, at least as far as the civilians are concerned. Um, Low level martial characters make combat encounters with the killer that much more thrilling, because it gives you the ability to hold your own, but with that real possibility that you might get overwhelmed quickly or even die. So having a party of low level characters will also make your party members really have to start thinking on your feet. As Cody said, it giving them spaces to hide instead of fighting, giving them you know, uh, reminding your players of options, that there are things that aren't necessarily going to, like, that there are things you can do in encounters that aren't combat, which might help you out in the long term. Things like the hide action or the help action, or other thing readying actions, things like that. Um, because you're going to want this to feel like a real challenge. You're going to want them to be running, looking over their shoulders and things like that. So one of the things I wanted to suggest was developing new backgrounds with abilities to kind of fall into this sort of Halloween Michael Myers setting. So a couple that I have thought of off the top of my head. Um, so creating something like the babysitter, where the babysitter has a skill that gives them advantage on doing first aid checks. The nerd gets things like genre savvy, so advantage on things like perception checks or history checks to learn a little bit more about Michael Myers, and maybe ways that you can defeat him if it finally eventually does come to blows. You could have a jock character who's good at athletic abilities and maybe will be a little bit stronger in combat. The popular girl who is maybe a little bit more charismatic to help get members of the town on your side, things like that. Um, Having your characters be low level doesn't mean that you're not going to have fun. Mainly because I think that when we think of Dungeons and Dragons, we think of, well, if I'm not able to attack 4 times in a round and, like, slice a body in half, like, am I even having fun? In this case, the fun would come from the fact that you have to start really thinking creatively about how to get out of these situations, instead of the way to make it the make it feel what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know, making it feel dangerous. In fact, I would highly recommend having an NPC get killed off pretty early on to highlight the severity of the situation. That this isn't just going to be a fun little walk in the park. That something like death is very possible, which is something I'll be talking about in a minute. So, yeah. So, that is sort of my thing, is writing developing new backgrounds along the lines of Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition, but of your more horror trope genre savvy characters. So yeah,
Nice. I like it. It feels very in line with you know, the slasher flick genre.
exactly.
So let's hit those GM tips, right? The For the game master, um, knowing when it's time for Michael Myers to go. At this point, well, when you get to this point, like, yeah, there's a very good chance that people are gonna die, but ultimately, like the movies, he's caught or he flees, and then the cycle's reborn in another movie. You should plan out exactly what the players need to do to quote unquote get to the end of the movie, right? To get to that point where they can finally take a breather because, at least for the time being, Michael Myers is gone. Whether it's calling the police or a last stand battle, there should be an endpoint that the players can realistically get to that does have some kind of final, like, quote unquote battle, right? Using 5e rules, you can give him the correct amount of HP, but don't feel like you need to be so rigid in how you rule that quote unquote final encounter. I find that combat in 5e can sometimes lead to these kind of boring quote unquote cleanup situations where the party spends time kind of just rolling dice, sighing, just kind of making, like, getting to the end because quote unquote those are the rules. You gotta bring everyone to 0 HP. If somebody has a really satisfying move after a harrowing experience, like, don't be afraid to just let Michael be defeated in that final moment. Right? At the end of the day, it's about creating a fun horror experience, and unless the party just really does all the worst horror things, like go into the spooky house alone and go up to the second floor with no way to get down, like, the game should be winnable. in a sense, right? Like there should be some way for them to like finish it off. So don't feel like you need like don't feel like as the game master that you need to go for the TPK. In fact, I would highly advise against it. Um I would mostly just try to stick with like scaring the party and like getting them to interact with the environment that you've created, and then at that final moment having there be like, oh, okay, well this is where you could either potentially die and Michael Myers leaves, or he leaves and the whoever that last player, those last couple players are, get to go scot free with just with just one psychological nightmare of a night.
Yeah,
But
I
that's what I would do for Michael, like just for like the end game. There should be an end game for this because that's like horror movies end, and I don't think anybody's going into a horror like if you were like, oh, we're gonna play Halloween, and people were like, yeah, like I don't think they were going into it being like, okay, well everyone died in the first 20 minutes, y'all suck, like let's go home, right? Like no
yeah.
one's going to like there should be a chance that somebody at the end of the thing is battered, beaten, broken, but you know what? Hey, they lived, and like that's a cool moment. And even if you're not the one who experiences it, you were there for like, oh man, it was crazy when Michael like fucking busted his hand through the wall and choked me to death. Like that was nuts. Or like, like those are the kinds of things you'll talk about later.
Yeah.
Why don't you hit me up with
Well,
your GM tip?
yes. So I was thinking a lot about the possibility of character death and permadeath in a game like this. Um, and so I have an idea, which maybe I kind of got these two a little bit flipped backwards. But in any case, I think that there is a real possibility that you're going to have at least a character or two die. And here's the thing: is you don't want, as Cody said, you want to make it engaging for everyone. You don't want the guy who died to like kind of have to go and sit in the corner because he died in the first 20 minutes, and it's like, oh shucks, just not gonna be able to play with my friends, I guess. Um, so I had an idea, which is so we're dealing with low level characters. The possibility of character dying is high. We're also considering that this is a slasher film. So, if you're playing a game and if you're playing a slasher game and like everyone lives, there's a little bit of an unbelievability thing to it. So, my idea was that when a character dies, they're going to be receiving a character sheet with ghost written on the top. There's going to be one kind of stat block for the ghosts, and then ghost characters will have one action every other round, which will be the help action, the shove action, or the grapple action. Basically, it gives the ability for party members who have died the ability to remain in the game. It gives them the ability to still participate, although not quite as frequently. And so, you're not going every single round, but you can still help out your friends and still be a little bit of a part of the action, even if it's, minor. I feel like the help, shove, and grapple actions are enough to, at the very least, distract the Michael Myers villain, to potentially give a window for your party members to escape. Because it's never fun dying in Dungeons and Dragons, but with some simple steps, you can take that death and you can kind of transmute it to being part of the experience, maybe just not quite as involved or maybe not quite as influential, but at the very least, you're still going to be creating an active role for a player who got killed after Michael Myers' hands, smashed through the wall and started choking you out. So
I also just had another idea.
yeah, hit me.
So it started me thinking about what is it, Friday, or yeah, Friday the 13th does this.
Hmm.
So in addition to like quote unquote ghost characters, maybe you have NPCs who happen to be nearby who can show up after that
Oh.
character's died. Because because the way those horror movies work often is like someone dies at the very beginning, and then like later down the road other people start to show up, and like the killer goes around and kills a lot of people. But like people will show up like halfway through the movie and be like, who are you? And they're like, oh, someone we mentioned earlier. And they're like, oh yeah, that guy or that girl or whoever. Like you could also like as the GM, you could have a couple of oh well, I know in this game I wanted to introduce a police officer,
Mhm.
and maybe when like one of the characters dies, maybe they'll do the ghost thing for a bit, but then after like once it reaches like the correct moment, you can be like, oh, and you hand that character sheet over to that person and be like, you were on your daily or you were on your nightly patrol when you got a call in from one of the neighbors. Someone's people seem to be screaming in a house nearby, and like then you go and investigate, and like that's a thing you could do as well. But I love the idea of like giving people like alternative options to do. So that was another one that I was thinking while you were doing that. That sounded really fun to me
Yeah,
as well.
I like that. In any case, I think it's important to in any case, I think it's important to like kind of give your players the ability to stay part of the fun even when they're not even when they're not directly in the action because they died.
100%.
But yeah, oh man, look at that. They're holding hands and they're
Ah.
skipping down the lane together. What a lovely time.
Oh, and then they just oh no.
Oh,
Oh, they just stabbed the nearest bystander. Oh no, there's blood. Oh, well, you know what? Let's ignore that for now. I'm
those
sure they'll have
crazy
fun.
kids.
Those crazy kids going around murdering people.
See you next time, Dungeons and Dragons.
See you later, wizard.
So anyway, Cody, if people like this episode, they wanted to learn more, where's a place that they can learn more?
They can go to our website at www.fandomroulette.com, where all of our episodes go live, and a bunch of other stuff. But most importantly, if you'd like to get your nerdy affair topic talked about on the show, you can go to the bottom, fill out a form. All you need is some kind of internet tag so we know who to credit, and then, whatever you'd like to talk about. And you know what? We'll look into it and we'll possibly feature it in the future.
Yeah, and hey, Cody, if people want to share this episode with a friend, but they don't necessarily use the same podcasting apps, where's some places where they can go and get more information about or where can they find episodes of the show? That's the words I was looking for.
Yeah, that we're on SoundCloud, YouTube, Spotify, Google Play, iTunes, Stitcher, all of your RSS podcast catchers. All you got to do is search Fandom Roulette.
And hey, if people want to send us like a funny meme or just check in to see how we're doing or things like that, where's some places that people can check in with us?
Well, if you're on Twitter, you can find us at fandomr_podcast. But if you're feeling more Facebook and Instagram savvy, you can find us on there. You just got to search Fandom Roulette.
Also, please remember to like, rate, review, and subscribe. Ring
Yeah,
the bell.
smash it.
Tell a friend. All of that wonderful stuff. Um, Leaving reviews helps us move up the ranks. Telling a friend helps us get more views, and as we continue to grow, um, that will help us, make more of this kind of stuff and have more fun with you guys as well. We know that there's a lot of stuff out there, like a lot of podcasts for people to listen to, and so we want to thank you for spending a little bit of time with us in our nerdy world. So,
Thank you.
uh, and then yeah, anything else, Cody, that you can think of, or
Enjoy Halloween.
yes, have a happy Halloween.
Woo.
But in any case, thank you so much for listening to this episode of Fandom Roulette. Signing off for Fandom Roulette, I'm Joe.
And I'm Cody.
And as always, stay nerdy.
Stay super nerdy.